All right, this is DiMaggio, and he's number 56 in the countdown because that's his streak. It's not really a ranking exactly, like he explained elsewhere. Joe DiMaggio was in the midst of a nasty little slump when he took the field on May 15th, 1941. He felt like he was hitting the ball pretty hard, but all luck had abandoned him. He was cracking line drives right at shortstops. He was smashing would-be doubles that were just within the reach of outfielders. He wondered when the cloud of bad luck would pass. On May 13th, he faced Cleveland's Bob Feller, and he went hitless, and luck had nothing to do with it. After the game, he muttered, "I don't think anybody's ever going to throw a ball faster than Feller does, and his curve, it ain't human." So when May 15th began, DiMaggio was in a foul mood. The Yankees were losing. New York manager Joe McCarthy made everybody come to Yankee Stadium early for extra batting and fielding practice. The Yankees lost 13-1 to the White Sox anyway to fall below 500. The New York Daily News' sardonic lead. The Yankees held secret practice at the stadium yesterday morning, and they should have made the ball game that followed a secret too. DiMaggio did manage a single off a pitcher named Eddie Smith. It was, the Daily News pointed out, his first single in 3 days. The most wonderful things so often begin in the plainest of ways. The next day, DiMaggio got 2 massive hits, one of them a 430-foot home run off White Sox pitcher Thornton Lee, one of the longest ever seen at the stadium, the Daily News crowed, and the other a 400-foot triple. It would be a little while, though, before anyone noticed that the streak had begun. Joe DiMaggio was already baseball's biggest star when the streak began. He'd won the previous 2 batting titles. He'd won the 1939 MVP convincingly over Jimmy Fox and Feller. His career numbers for his first 5 seasons were an average of .343, an on-base percentage of .402, and a slugging percentage of .623. And he was celebrated for his center field defense. And his Yankees had won the World Series in 4 of those 5 years. But he wasn't yet DiMaggio, all capital letters. You have to remember, he came of age in a time of legends. Babe Ruth had only just retired when DiMaggio began. Lou Gehrig was DiMaggio's teammate until he could no longer go on, and yet considered himself the luckiest man in the face of the earth. Fox and Hank Greenberg were at their peak. Mel Ott was cracking hits and homers with his crazy batting style, and Feller, as DiMaggio himself admitted, threw a baseball as hard as anyone ever had. Then, in Boston, a thin kid named Ted Williams suddenly appeared and hit rockets. What was DiMaggio's claim to be among the immortals? He was a terrific ball player, yes, but he didn't yet have anything he could call his own. His name would become legendary. "Where have you gone, Joe DiMaggio?" Simon and Garfunkel sang. But in those tense years before World War II, DiMaggio did not yet spark those emotions. It was foreign, and foreignness was feared. Stereotypes filled so many of the stories written about DiMaggio. The boy eating his mama's spaghetti, the slick black hair, the constant mentions of olive oil. Although he learned Italian first, Life magazine assured fans, Joe, now 24, speaks English without an accent and is otherwise well adapted to U.S. mores. And then there was the money DiMaggio was unafraid to fight for. He held out for more money after his sensational 1937 season when he led the league in homers and total bases. It turned into the nastiest fight imaginable. "DiMaggio is an ungrateful young man and is very unfair to his teammates, to say the least," Yankees owner Jacob Ruppert told reporters. "I've offered $25,000 and he won't get a button over that amount. Why, how many men his age earn that much? As far as I'm concerned, that's all he's worth to the ball club, and if he doesn't sign, we'll win the pennant without him." DiMaggio was outraged. But in those days, there really wasn't anything to be done. The press was against him. The fans were against him. He sheepishly signed for $25,000, at which point the victorious Ruppert ungraciously and smugly said, "I hope the young man has learned his lesson." When DiMaggio returned, the fans booed him. He never forgot that, ever. So yes, Joe DiMaggio's 1941 was a star, but he still needed something to take him higher. He cracked a single on May 17th and went 3 for 3 the next day against the St. Louis Browns. He doubled off Danny Gelhaus on Monday, scraped a single off St. Louis's Eldon Elker in the bottom of the 8th on Tuesday, and got 2 hits off Detroit pitchers Wednesday. Although in that game, the bigger story was his perfect throw that nailed Charlie Gehringer trying to go from first to third in a single. It is striking looking back to see how easily the streak could have died before it ever got going. He singled in his last at-bat against Detroit's Archie McCain. He got just one single in 5 tries against Boston in a 9-9 tie. He blooped just one single off Lefty Grove when the Red Sox crushed the Yankees 10-3. At this point, the streak was only 11 games. Then he got 4 hits and hit his second tape measure homer of the streak in Washington on May 27th. 2 days later, reporters made the first mention. In the 4th, Joe DiMaggio led off with a single to left, stretching his hitting streak to 14 straight games. He was barely stretching this thing along. In the 9 games between May 28th and June 5th, DiMaggio got just 1 hit in 8 of them. It didn't feel like anything. In one of those games, a 13-0 loss to Boston, DiMaggio made 3 errors, so who cared about his meaningless single? On June 1st, the Daily News called out DiMaggio for getting his slumps. On June 3rd, DiMaggio's lone hit was a homer, but the Yankees lost again and were mired in 3rd place behind Cleveland and Chicago, and just a game up on Boston and Philadelphia. But people were beginning to follow along. June 4th was a rainy and dour day in New York. Gehrig's funeral services were held that day. The Yankees, though, were in Detroit. Well, many of them were. Bill Dickey left Detroit for the funeral. DiMaggio's first wife was there as well. But DiMaggio decided to stay in Detroit, and the next day he went 1 for 5, a triple of Hal Newhouser. The Yankees lost again, but his streak was at 21 games. On June 8th, DiMaggio managed 2 hits in each game of a doubleheader in St. Louis. The streak moved to 24 games. The Daily News' Jimmy Powers was still unimpressed. In his famed Powerhouse column, he wrote that, yes, DiMaggio had a hitting streak going, but that his batting average has really been fattened at the expense of pushover pitchers, fellows on the lowly A's, Browns, and Senators. Powers then ran a chart showing that DiMaggio was hitting .231 against Cleveland and .222 against the White Sox, the Yankees' top contenders, but he was hitting a combined .448 against Philadelphia, St. Louis, and Washington. You ought to use the big club and the big bat on the big teams, he advised DiMaggio in an accompanying comic. When DiMaggio hit 26 straight games, 2 for 4 against Chicago with a game-winning homer in the 10th, the story finally began to take shape. Who had the longest hitting streak anyway? It was a pretty obscure trivia question at that time, but the modern record belonged to the great George Sisler, who had hit 41 straight games. Reporters rushed to find him, where he was running a sporting goods store in St. Louis. If my hitting streak is going to get broken, Sisler said, I'd like to see Joe DiMaggio do it. The reporter asked Sisler if he'd gotten any breaks during the streak. Lucky hits, Sisler said, as all great hitters must. I don't recall offhand. DiMaggio homered the next day and doubled the day after that to tie the team record at 29. And it could have ended there. On June 17th, DiMaggio failed to get a hit his first 2 times up, and his 3rd time hit a ground ball to short. The ball hit a divot in the infield and bounced up and over the glove and head of White Sox shortstop Luke Appling. That, DiMaggio would say, was the luckiest hit of my streak. But there are no lucky hits for great hitters, and the streak moved to 30, a Yankees record. He was living right, finally. An infield single extended the streak to 31. That was the same day that Joe Louis fought Billy Conn in a fight the whole country was talking about. DiMaggio wasn't really hitting any better than normal. He'd hit .347 for 3 weeks, and his lifetime batting average at that moment was .343. But he had excellent timing, and then he did get hot. 3 hits against the White Sox, 4 hits against the Tigers on Ladies' Day at Yankee Stadium, 2 more hits, including a homer against the Tigers a couple of days after that. That homer actually set a different record. It was the 18th consecutive game that someone on the Yankees had hit a home run. As DiMaggio kept hitting, reporters realized that they were covering something pretty new. Every day, people would ask each other, hey, did DiMaggio get a hit today? Reporters sought out Ted Williams and asked him if he wanted to have a hitting streak like DiMaggio's. His answer is almost as legendary as the streak itself. I sure have, Williams said. I like to break every hitting record in the book. When I walk down the street, I'd like them to say, there goes Ted Williams, the best hitter in baseball. It turned out that Ty Cobb, who had a 40-game hitting streak in his career and could be ruthlessly dismissive of younger players, was rooting hard for Joltin' Joe. DiMaggio's wonderful, he said. Would he hit the dead ball? He'd hit anything. He'd be a great start any time in the history of the game. On to part 2, Dad.